So he goes back to his garage. He had a mill in his garage, like any, good engineer. And so he started prototyping stuff and came back a few months later and was like, Dan, I think I have something that works. I figured out why nobody can print Peak.
Hello there, Internet. My name is Adam Fosnot. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have been working with 3D printers of all shapes and sizes for over 7 years. I've worked with machines from under $200 to over $200,000, and I have learned so much in the process. One thing I noticed is that a 3D printer tends to be judged on two extremes, one being a press release where everything is shiny and perfect, and the other being a YouTube review where a lot of times every product gets criticized. Another insight is that there tend to be two worlds in 3D printing, one being the industrial space and the other the hobby space, and those two worlds rarely talk to each other. This podcast breaks down those barriers to have a transparent, no BS conversation about the world of 3D printing and technology. I'm so happy to have you on board. Let's get started. So I have a small set of questions to just kick things off. First of all, thank you for taking the time again.
Absolutely.
And could you just do a quick introduction of yourself and Slice Engineering to the audience?
Sure. So my name is Dan Barouse. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Slice Engineering. Slice Engineering makes components for 3D printers, specifically focused on high performance components. So we're not trying to compete to be, the lowest priced. That is a complaint that we get, is that our stuff is expensive. But when I wake up in the morning, I want to be excited about making the best in the world of something and not the cheapest in the world of something. So that's kind of the role that we've picked, is to try and be the best at specifically hot-end technology in FDM 3D printing.
Awesome. And then we're going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour just talking 3D printing.
Awesome.
But I'm sure there's more to you than just that. So I would love if you would share something yourself kind of outside of 3D printing.
Sure. I'm married. I'm a dad, which is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me. I kind of always knew I wanted kids, but actually being a dad has been the most transformational experience of my life, and definitely the hardest. At one point, my co-founder doesn't have kids yet, and we were having dinner one time, and he was like, so what's more difficult, being a dad or starting a business? And I was like, totally being a dad. He was really shocked by that answer, because starting a business is pretty freaking hard. But being a dad's great. He's I have a son, and he's just a ton of fun.
How old is he?
He is 18 months old.
18 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So a new son, and you've been going through all of those learnings.
He's learning to climb onto things like bar stools and try and get stuff off the counter. And
oh boy.
It's a little scary.
I have a nephew who's about two and a half.
Uh-huh.
So we got to watch him kind of grow up. I have no kids myself yet. But man, I can't, to your point, imagine starting a company, running a company, and also having a new baby in the mix of that.
My wife always jokes that I have two kids. One is Slice, and one is our son. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you look at kind of how Slice started, was it kind of your vision initially? I know you mentioned you had a co-founder. How did things kind of first get the ball rolling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love origin stories personally. I'm like I love stories. So we kind of honestly have a typical like started in a garage kind of story, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's really how it happened. Chris, my co-founder, who I mentioned a minute ago, he and I were both working at a medical device company together, and we had an application where we were trying to print some higher temperature plastic, specifically PEEK, and get them into a clean room. So they had to, be sterilizable. And at the time in 2016, we couldn't really find anybody to do it. And so Chris was like, okay, well, this can't be that hard. It's just a thermoplastic. Like, surely somebody knows how to do this. And so we called a bunch of people, couldn't find anybody. And he was like, I'm gonna figure out how to do it. So he goes back to his garage. He had a mill in his garage, like any good engineer, and so he started prototyping stuff, and came back a few months later and was like, Dan, I think I have something that works. I figured out why nobody can print peak. You need a better hot end, and you need an enclosure. I don't know how to do the enclosure, but I think we can do a hot end. And so came up with this idea. We looked at the market, built prototypes, went to Murph, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
before we started the podcast. Yeah, so we went to Murph and launched there with some prototypes. We had 30 or 40 of them, something like that, and we sold out in a few hours. And we're
Okay.
like, whoa, okay, this is for real. Like, people are actually interested in this. And from there, we went to some, larger, sort of like more industrial trade shows, and realized, yeah, there's definitely a need for this type of product in the market, and it can help solve some pretty cool pressing issues. So that's how we started.
That's so cool. I love origin stories also. And I definitely want to kind of pick up on kind of your path to where you are today. So that was in Murph 2018. You made
Yeah.
the first 40 prototypes, I'm assuming, on the mill in Chris's garage.
Actually, so we found a machine shop that would do it for us,
Okay.
because we were trying to build marketing materials and a booth, and yeah, there were just all these moving parts while working full time, of course. So we were doing this nights and weekends, and so Chris just wasn't going to be able to machine them all in his garage in time to hit the
Gotcha.
deadlines.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's a lot of mill work.
Yes.
So was this entirely bootstrapped, self-funded? Because from my experience, building 40 of something is a lot harder than building one, and there's a lot
Yeah.
more capital involved in that.
Yeah, so we bootstrapped I mean, we're essentially still bootstrapped. We have
Okay.
used some financing to help move things along, but yeah, we're pretty much bootstrapped. It's been quite the ride. So
Yeah.
it took us a little while to go full time with this, because we wanted to try and keep the risk relatively low, in the sense of, I have a wife and kid to support, so we wanted to not lose the house and things like that. So we definitely still went out on a limb, but we wanted to make sure we had revenue coming in first, and sort of do like the lean approach to starting a company. I don't know if you're familiar with Lean Startup, but great book.
It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, it's a great book. So we kind of followed that model.
Another one that I'm a big fan of is called Traction.
Yes, I just read Traction earlier. I guess late last year.
Okay. I
great
read it
book.
last year also.
Nice, good timing.
Awesome. And I'm really happy to hear that you guys have bootstrapped. I'm the same way, and so I've kind of funded everything myself, trying to keep risk low, make sure that you have revenue coming in to kind of prove it's something
Right.
people want. I really love that kind of business approach. And so, did you and Chris both kind of first get exposed to 3D printing at the medical device company, or did you guys have prior experience?
He and I are both mechanical engineers, so I mean, you learn about it in school originally. 10 years ago for me now, and 20 for Chris. School, I mean college. Uh, there wasn't as much of, like, you couldn't just go down to the library and there were 3D printers in the library.
Right.
That was not really happening 10, 20 years ago. But there was still some, minor exposure to 3D printing. And then, we both worked in manufacturing in various capacities, and in different industries for a while. And so, yeah, I feel like you can't be in manufacturing and product development without having some exposure to 3D printing. So, yeah, I'd had some exposure to SLA and FDM, and then we'd use some SLS parts here and there for various things. But it was always like ooh, this is 3D printed. It was very much like there was this super cool wow factor around it. And even now, I talk to people. And I say, "Oh yeah, I'm in the 3D printing industry," and they're like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" It's fun to get that kind of reaction.
Yeah, it's funny. I get the same thing.
Yeah.
I'll still meet people who are like, "What's a 3D printer?"
Yeah.
And I get to explain the fancy hot glue gun story behind,
Yes, I use the same one, the hot glue gun with the weed whacker filament. That's what I say.
Yes.
Yeah. Squirt it
It's
onto a plate.
yes. It's such a everyone knows what a hot glue gun is, so it's a
Yeah.
much more attainable way to look at things. Um, so you in 2018, you went to Murph, you went to Rapid,
Mhm.
really realized, confirmed that this was something that people needed.
Yeah.
And I agree, by the way. I think even today, hot ends um, definitely sway more towards the low cost side compared to the premium side.
Right.
Most 3D printers have basically the same hot end on it.
Right.
What happened after that? Did you
Yeah.
just place more and more orders and keep selling them? Did you have a marketing strategy behind it?
Yeah. So we definitely have a marketing strategy. Sometimes it may not feel like we have one, but, but we definitely do. Uh, and yeah, I mean, we're trying to, we, got into forums. We talked to people, went to all the rep rap festivals and maker fairs, and really, it's, I mean, business is about relationships, and so yeah, we built relationships. That's essentially what we did. We started building a reseller network. Uh, we've got resellers on multiple continents now and across many different countries, and that of course helps get the word out. So you have a new reseller, they already have a customer base that they're interacting with. Or sometimes we were getting brand new resellers that were launching and they liked our product, and we helped them to essentially uh, get the initial stocking quantity out the door and get off the ground. So yeah, we've tried a bunch of different strategies. Worked with YouTubers, had some articles. Hackaday wrote an article about us a while back, sort of at the beginning, and that kind of helped get the word out. So yeah, there's been a bunch of different means to get the word out, and yeah, it's just been I wouldn't say gradual or steady. It's been more of like uh, holding on to the end of a rocket as we as we grow. So yeah,
I think rocket speed growth would be what everyone who starts a company dreams of.
mm,
Um, but it's cool to kind of hear how you've grown so quickly through just those various means. And I will say, getting on Hackaday is so difficult. So
yeah.
so congrats on that.
Thank you.
We recently published a video on the Ender Loop,
Oh, cool.
and how someone that I met named Michael had converted his Ender 3 into a belt printer, and Hackaday recently featured that,
Nice. That's
which
awesome.
was really cool. That was just this morning, actually.
Oh wow. Yeah. Congrats.
Thanks. It was more about Michael's project, as it should be,
Mhm.
since he was the one who did it. But regardless, um, so you're growing really quickly. You're working with resellers all around the world. Um, do you find that most people who are interested in your hot ends are on the hobbyist side or on the industrial side?
It's surprisingly about a 50-50 split. Some of our early customers were medical device companies that were trying to print peak for cervical spacers or jaw replacement parts, or I mean any sort of medical application where you can use peak, and you can do some pretty unique things with peak, especially with um, there's different techniques to handle it. Um, but our hot end helps with that in the sense that it really makes a big difference in heat creep. So it's very useful for a customer that needs to print peak, to be able to have that capability. But of course, there's not like thousands of medical device companies that are buying hot ends, so that's not a sustainable business model in and of itself. So yeah, we have a ton of customers that are buying, for their Ender 3,
Yeah.
and buying for their Creality CR10 or for their Prusa. We had quite a few of our early customers were actually Prusa users, and they, Prusa people like to mod their stuff. And so, this is a relatively easy mod to install. We've got a video on how to do it. There's printable adapters to replace that whole sort of top carriage piece,
Okay.
and you can slot a mosquito right in. So it makes it an easy upgrade and a fun upgrade that increases performance. So
Right. So when you think about the performance, I think the higher temperature rating is kind of a really easy win if you want to start printing peak in those higher end materials. What other benefits are there for the mosquito? Or I know there's the copperhead, and you have a range of products at this point.
right.
If you look at the first one, the mosquito that you were selling at first in 2018, what were people really looking for as benefits of an upgrade? Hey there, it's Adam. If you're enjoying this video, could you go ahead and tap the like button? It's totally free for you, and through the magic of internet algorithms, it will help more people see the podcast. Thanks.
Yeah. So the easiest way I can demonstrate this is with a visual. So I have this visual
Oh.
behind me. I don't know if this is going to show up super well on your podcast, but
So convenient.
essentially, there's a traditional hot end. The heat break is also the structural component that connects the cold section to the hot section, and so to make something a structure, it needs to be structurally sound. And but if you want something not to conduct very much heat, which you don't want a heat break to conduct heat, ideally, you need to make it as thin and light as possible because conduction is a function of cross-sectional area. So ideally, you've got these two sort of opposing needs from one component, which is never a good thing. So we did a couple things there. We decoupled those two functions, the structure and the heat break capacity. And so to do that, we created what we call our roll cage. So there is a big, structure around the heat break so that the heat break can be totally unloaded. It's not subject to stresses during the printing process. So with the exception of, internal friction from the filament moving up and down. So that allows you to make a super thin-walled heat break. So our heat break's 80% or 85% less thick than a comparable monolithic heat break, which means you get 85% less heat creep up the filament path, and that allows you to do a bunch of different things: improve resolution, improve flow rate, increase the temperature rating, and decrease retractions. So all those things come from the fact that you have a thinner wall heat break. The other thing that we did is, anytime you have two competing goals, the best way to solve it is to make a composite. So humans have been doing that for millennia. If you look back the earliest days, people have you take two dissimilar materials and you combine them together and use both their properties to to accomplish the goal. So we did that with our heat break. So our heat break, and this is a little bit harder to see here, but essentially we have a copper slug in the bottom and a copper slug in the top that it helps distribute the heat. We call it a radiator up here. And then it's combined, the two copper components that conduct heat super well are combined together with a steel, a cold rolled, heat treated steel that is a poor conductor relative to the copper. So heat energy moves just like water does. So if you think of water flowing from one place to another, it's going to take whatever the easiest route is to come to a lower energy state, and heat does the same thing. So the copper slug in the bottom helps for good heat distribution and dissipation, good heat distribution in the bottom section. The copper piece up top, whatever heat comes up through that stainless tube gets dissipated really well at the top section. So we just made a composite, essentially. It's our bimetallic heat break technology is the official term.
Gotcha. Okay. And so when I look at bimetallic heat breaks, they seem really difficult to manufacture.
Yes.
Is that something that you guys do in the United States? Do you do it internationally? Did you have to interview dozens of different contract manufacturers to get that done? Can you dive into that at all?
Yeah, so we developed the process entirely internally, I guess you would say, and so yeah, we do all of our machining, assembly is done in the United States. So everything that you see on the mosquito, down to the packaging, actually is produced in the United States. We do have some of the packaging is made in Canada, but we're still North America. um, so yeah, we try to. One of our core values is to try and sort of stay local.
Hmm.
And so we try to stay as local as we can with whatever we can, within reason to what the market will bear. And that's really important. I mean, jobs are important. Small businesses support the majority of the economy, which
Hmm.
is they've really taken a hit with COVID, and it's a really sad thing. But so our goal is how can we keep jobs here, grow jobs here, and help people out. Good jobs.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I know so much of the equipment in the 3D printing space is made internationally, and even at Power Belts, nearly everything we source is international to try to make a very affordable
Right.
product. The other thing I ran into was that at the part volumes that we wanted, um, a lot of companies just never responded
Yeah.
to to quote
We went through
requests.
that.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
definitely.
So finding someone that's willing to make me 50 parts
Mm,
was really challenging, or it was crazy expensive. But I'm really happy
right.
that you guys have found a way around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what happens is if you can figure out the business model and figure out, okay, what's my break even point, then you can, especially if you don't have, salary overheads at the beginning, uh, because you're not paying yourself.
Right.
If you can do that at the beginning, it can help you scale to get to a number where it does make sense for other companies, suppliers to work with you. So that's essentially the model that we followed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a solid piece of advice, I think, for anyone looking to make a hardware product.
Hmm.
Because as I'm sure you've experienced, hardware products are notoriously challenging to get off the ground.
Extremely. Yeah. There's a reason that pretty much only the big companies do it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Kind of in the same train of thought, is there anything that sticks out in your mind as one of the biggest challenges from a sourcing perspective when you were first getting started?
Hmm. One of our biggest challenges in general has been trying to find, of course, reliable suppliers for different things. As I mentioned, we try to get everything as local as possible, and so that cuts down on things like time zone differences and
Hmm.
language barriers and things like that. But you still have situations like there's a giant blizzard that covers half the country, so what do you do about that? So there's always challenges. I think our biggest challenge in general has not been so much sourcing, but more so um, maintaining inventory in a reasonable fashion to where we're not tying up cash flow, but also we're um, preparing for growth, and that's been a struggle not only for us, but you look at like Prusa, they always have a 3 week lead time on their printers because so many people are ordering, and so that's been a struggle for us too to try and figure out how do we. It wasn't a struggle at the beginning. At the beginning, it was kind of like, okay, where are the sales? But
Okay.
now it's like, okay, where how do you meet demand when a video comes out on YouTube and then demand spikes and you
Yes.
didn't have inventory to cover that. So that's always a struggle.
Yeah, I can definitely relate in just managing what do we have here, what are we going to need to have in stock in
Hmm.
3 months, 6 months, what
Right,
does that look like, and making sure the bank account has enough at each stage in
right,
the process.
absolutely. Yeah, it's
Um,
it's a lot of gymnastics, I guess you could call it, to
yeah,
figure out where do you set the level and how do you make sure you can get from A to B.
Definitely. Um, so how long were you selling the mosquito until you started moving into other products?
We initially launched with the mosquito and um, some a limited nozzle selection because we kind of knew you needed to have a nozzle with hot end.
Right.
Same with we had heaters and we had a heater selection, a heater choice, and pretty quickly we just listened to the market demand and figured out what our customers have been great in the sense that they provide really good feedback, and so we just listened to that a lot. Um, somebody says, "Hey, you've got whatever 24-volt, but you don't have 12. Like, give me 12."
Hmm.
Might be a bad example because there's a lot more 24-volt that sell, but um, in any case, the yeah, just listening to the customer responses really helped us build out the product line. The Copperhead came out as a direct result of MRF 2019, I guess, where we had a bunch of people saying, "Hey, love the mosquito, love the bimetallic heat break. Could you make it cheaper and easier for me to put it on my Ender, 3?" And so we went back to the drawing board and said, "Okay, can we produce a bunch of bimetallic heat breaks, but just look at like a different way to do it?" And so we looked at, essentially Copperhead is what came out of that. So it's a more traditional model in the sense that you don't have that roll cage around it, but it's still a bimetallic heat break. So thicker tube uh, that can support the weight.
Gotcha. And so the way you got the cost down, was it really around making it more of, I forget the term you used last time, but I'm going to go with a unibody heatsink compared
Yeah.
to a central and a roll cage? Was that kind of the key to the price difference?
So part of it is that, and then there's less parts on a Copperhead than on a mosquito, so that's
Okay.
part of the cost. We also are making a lot more bimetallic heat breaks now, so you get economies of scale from that. Uh, so that's helpful, obviously, in making the parts. And then it's the Copperhead has a little bit thicker wall, so we're still about 60% less than a monolithic heat break, but not as thin as a mosquito. So you get you know most of the some I guess half the benefits of the mosquito with the Copperhead, and still get the bimetallic heat break technology. So that thicker tube makes it easier to assemble and
Gotcha.
simplifies the whole process.
Definitely. I think anyone who has changed a nozzle or upgraded hot end has snapped a heat break clean
Yep.
in half at some point in their life.
Yeah, we got one. We got a so we have a help desk system now.
Okay.
So people submit tickets, and it's connected to all of our stuff, so we can have like a single source of truth for responding to customer inquiries. And we had one the other day where somebody sent us a video of them trying to uninstall a nozzle. They were actually twisting it on instead of twisting it off. And so we were like, I'm sorry, man, but like, you, you gotta, lefty righty tighty, lefty loosey. You gotta learn that part to take the nozzle off. And he was angry at us for the hot end failing, but um, you know, nothing withstands uh, significant application of torque over time.
Yeah, I find that a lot of hobbyists are sometimes working on their printers late at night, and then they'll make a silly mistake, and I'm no exception.
Yeah,
And then
when you're tired, it's so much easier to
you're
to make a
tired,
mistake,
you make a mistake, and then you're mad.
right?
And then from also what I've seen in Power About, you wake up in the morning to a really angry email, and
Yeah,
then usually it gets resolved very quickly. But
right. Yeah, we've got one of the first things that we did once we started building the team was I wrote this document that we call the principles of customer interaction, and
okay,
so it's our 4 rules for interacting with other people, and the main thing is the golden rule, right? You treat others how you want to be treated, and then the other one is the next one, number 2, is seek first to understand. So it's like,
hmm
okay, person on the other side of the screen, the other side of the telephone, whatever, is a person just like you, and they may have had a bad day. It might have been late at night. Who knows what's going on in their life, and so let's try and treat them as best as humanly possible uh, to get to the bottom of the issue. Because most of the time, it's a miscommunication. That's usually the root of the problem, and so if we can get that miscommunication resolved and lined up and be on the same page, usually all the frustration goes away.
Definitely. What are those other two principles of customer service? I'm so
Yeah.
curious.
So the third one is personalize, and that's nobody wants to feel like and we're a small company, so let me just say that first. So we're not like some big company and you call up and you get the 1-800 line, whatever. So there are real humans in Florida, on the other side of the phone and on the other side of the email. And when you call someplace or email someplace, you want to be treated like you're a person, because you are. And so personalize is one of our key principles there, because we want to make sure that we're not just giving cookie cutter answers to everybody, that we're addressing the kind of root problem and treating them, with their first name or whatever name we have, and addressing them like a person.
I love that. Treat them like a person, not like support case 00063.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we do have a ticket number that's assigned, but it's also next to their name. So
Yeah.
assuming they give us a name, sometimes we don't get a name, but if we have a name, we're going to use the name, because that's important. People's names are important.
Yeah. And then what's the last one?
The last one is speed is critical. So we try to respond quickly. We're not always great at that one, but not for lack of trying. It's just for keeping up with the volume of inquiries that we get can be pretty challenging.
Sure, definitely. Yeah. So taking one step back, I'm thinking about customer service, and one thing that I discovered pretty quickly is, as soon as I started shipping printer kits, customer service and questions exploded so much more than I expected.
Yes.
Was that one of the first positions that you hired for, or how did you go about kind of expanding the team past you and Chris? Do you have a question about 3D printing? If so, I would love to answer it. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments down below, or go to 3dprintauthority.com/forms to submit your question. Thanks.
Yeah, so the first person we hired was actually in customer service, because you just physically can't, even if it only takes 3 minutes to respond to a support case, to respond to a person, right, that has an inquiry. If you get 100 of those a day, like, that's your whole day.
There's your whole day.
That's good. It's gone. The time's gone. And you still got to eat and go to the bathroom and brush your teeth and, sleep. So yeah, you got to, customer support was the first role that we hired, and it's a critical aspect of the company.
Awesome. And then what about from there? Customer support, super important.
Yeah.
Keeping customers happy, first hire. How did you grow from there? And then how big is your team now?
So from there, I think our next hire was, we had a company outside doing our shipping and fulfillment.
Okay.
Because when we first started, and Chris and I were doing nights and weekends in our garages, Chris and I were both doing some assembly at night, and, putting kits together and dropping them off at the post office the next morning before work. And that was not sustainable at all. So we found a third-party company to do it, which was super helpful and allowed us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also pretty expensive on a per unit cost, and so we brought that in house. We hired somebody to help us ship orders out, and we started with just reseller orders first, and then we brought everything in house. So
okay,
yeah, and now we're at 7 people.
7 people, awesome. You brought up resellers again. How does that relationship work? And it seems almost counterintuitive to me to have resellers and also sell on your own website. I know a lot of companies do it. So how does that relationship work? How do you go about talking to resellers? Do people just send you cold emails all the time wanting to be resellers? Like, what's that like?
Yeah. Now that's the case. It certainly was
Okay.
not the case before. I mean, it started with I knew that we needed to get the word out,
Hmm.
and the easiest way to get the word out without spending my life savings on just ads was to talk to people that already had a customer base.
Hmm.
And so we met some at trade shows. We cold emailed or cold called some, and built out enough of a sort of initial network to get us going. And then from there, it becomes uh, almost it's like the more resellers you add, the more resellers want to come on board,
Gotcha.
and that's great. And I mean, we don't consider ourselves to be competing with our resellers. We're all on the same team. We're not. We're all just trying to improve the 3D printing industry as a whole and provide better options for the community of 3D printing enthusiasts as well as the industrial, or professional side of 3D printing. So uh, yeah, so it's a very amicable relationship.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm happy to hear it. One thing that keeps coming to mind is you guys specialize in hot ends. Why nothing else? And why not full printers?
Right. That's a great question. So, we've talked about building printers. There's a great book by a guy named Jim Collins called Good to Great, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but
I've read
he
it. It's another good
okay,
one.
yeah, it's a great, great, great book. So one of the things he talks about is um, this flywheel concept of you want to generate enough momentum, to sustain uh, anything, right? You
Hmm.
need it's Newton's laws, right? An object in motion wants to stay in motion, so you got to get the object in motion. It takes a lot of energy to create that momentum, but once it's there, it doesn't take as much energy to sustain. And so the analogy that Jim Collins uses with this flywheel concept is once it's spooled up and you've got that energy and momentum, then you start looking at other ways to expand the company and or the organization, other types of printing or whatever it is, other services that would be a complement to your core business. Because otherwise, you can get so distracted so easily and not keep the main thing the main thing. Um, that's Stephen Covey, Seven Principles of Highly Effective People. I like to read if you had um, so there's just we want to make sure that we are doing our thing so well that we're not getting distracted with other stuff. So that's why just hot ends.
Gotcha. What? I don't know if you're the same way or if Chris is the same way, but I find myself wanting to get distracted really easily.
Yeah.
Just a couple weeks ago, I was like, our printers are great, but I want to build a really big one, just like a really really big one. And I had to stop myself immediately because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. There's a list of priorities of other stuff that is so much more important. How do you keep yourself from getting distracted? Do you have any
Yeah.
techniques?
It's a great. So I'm the one that's more prone to distraction. Chris is pretty focused.
Gotcha.
So I tend to be like, oh, this would be awesome, and then Chris is like, okay, slow down. Let's think about, like you just said, we got 50 things we got to do now just to keep the lights on, and keep things going and keep hiring engineers. Um, so yeah, I think it's super easy to get distracted. It's very difficult to stay laser focused. And there's a book by a guy named David Allen called Getting Things Done. And
Okay.
one of the things he talks about is essentially creating like triage lists. And I do things a little bit differently than the way he does it, but uh, Eisenhower actually used a similar principle, and I sort of followed more of his model. But he has lists for different things that you need to do. It's like do now, do sometime, that you're going to put on your calendar,
Mm-hmm.
delegate it to somebody, and don't ever do it. And
Okay.
so if you are able to like categorize things into those lists, you can, say you want to build a giant printer later down the road. It's like, okay, let me put this on the schedule it list. I'm going to put this 6 months down the road. And then 6 months from now, if I still really want to build a big printer, let's make it happen. But if I
Gotcha.
don't, then scratch it off the list, throw it away, and do something else. So
Gotcha.
that's the main way we kind of stay organized.
I like that a lot. I'm a huge to-do list person, and I'll
Mm,
have every task I can think of, and then I'll pick out the ones that are most critical
yeah,
today, this week, etc.
right.
I haven't read that book though. Truthfully, I am not good at reading. It's not one of my strengths. I don't love it. I force myself into
Hmm.
it when I can, and
Yeah.
usually I learn lots of good things from it. But
Audiobooks. I love audiobooks.
I do also love audiobooks
Yeah.
and podcasts. So
Yeah. I can tell you
guilty.
like podcasts, so that's great. Yeah.
They're great for background noise. They're great when you're driving. Just
Yes.
can't get enough.
Driving, running, whatever. Yeah. Good time to do audiobooks and podcasts.
Definitely. Um, One thing that I'm so curious about is what is one thing that you're excited about in the world of 3D printing outside of just your products? This could be
Mm.
a trend that you're seeing, a specific technology, or maybe something that you want to see more of in the
Mhm.
industry. Do you want to be a guest on this podcast? If so, go to 3dprintauthority.com/forms to apply. Thanks.
Yeah. Two things jump to mind immediately. And the
Okay.
first is because of COVID. So there's people talk about like technology awareness in
Mm-hmm.
like happens in cycles. And so first there's like a huge media hype, and then for all these predictions, we're going to be driving flying cars, whatever. And then
Yeah.
everybody's like, okay, that didn't happen. That's stupid. And then like interest tanks. But in the background, there's a bunch of really smart people working on it
Mm-hmm.
and advancing the technology. And then a while later, it pops back up again. So I feel like we had this huge like media spike and public interest, and everybody was excited. Everybody was going to have a 3D printer in their house in like 2012, 2013, 2014, and then it kind of fell off a little bit. And last year, with everybody printing face shields and more people buying 3D printers and putting them in their homes and realizing, hey, this is a great tool to teach my kids about STEM. This is a way that I can teach them mechanical knowledge. This is a way that I can have a fun way for my kids to learn, like CAD software, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw a lot of that happening, and that's something I'm really excited about. That the sort of average, maybe non-nerd like us kind of person is getting excited about 3D printing again, and it's becoming more of a household terminology and name. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. The other thing I'm really excited about is there's been some papers recently about like 3D SLA essentially, or DLP
Okay.
technology, which is, you've got like the vat of fluid and of resin, and then instead of building it in layers, it's like the object gets shined into the middle of the vat and formed instantaneously. And if that works long term, it'll be so cool. So I don't know how far away we are from that being, a reasonably priced method of manufacturing, but once it does happen, I mean, then we're talking like Star Trek replicator status kind of stuff. I think that'll be really cool.
That's a great one to bring up. I actually was looking that up to refresh my memory earlier to try to reach out and interview them,
Oh, cool.
because that I think it's termed volumetric 3D printing.
Hmm.
I think that's definitely one of those areas that again, not very many people know about it. Not very many businesses or research universities are succeeding at it. But it has so much rapid 3D printing potential that's definitely a really exciting trend.
It is exciting. I guess one more thing I thought of was non-planar.
I only asked for one, and we got three. We got three. Let's hear it.
Yeah, non-planar. If you're familiar with non-planar FDM printing, so that is super exciting too, because you can really totally change geometry of layer lines. Is no longer and z-axis strength in a part is no longer a limitation in FDM. So it completely changes the capabilities for FDM to really take on some of those, industrial level parts that couldn't be done before. So I'm super pumped about that.
I agree. That's a fun one. That's another one that it seemed like it was really popular for a short period of time, and then interest died just as quickly as it spiked up. It's so satisfying to watch.
It is. It's very cool to watch.
I can watch time lapses all day long of non-planar printing.
Yeah, it's very cool to watch.
Awesome. The last thing is, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about Slice Engineering? And if you have any special calls to action that you'd like the audience to take, now's your time.
Sure. Yeah. So sliceengineering.com is our website. So that's the best place to find any new cool stuff going on. We actually just announced a new super high flow hotend that we're calling the Magnum Plus. So check that out. We've got a cool white paper available for download about high-speed 3D printing with the Magnum Plus. So that's a cool thing. And then we've got call to action, especially for your listeners. If you put in the code podcast, so just the word podcast at checkout, you'll get 10% off your entire order on our website. So.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. I'm sure the audience will appreciate it. Again, thank you for taking the time to join me.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll look forward to connecting in the future. Best of luck to you and the rest of the Slice team on your continued growth.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate it. Wish the same for you, Power Belt, and the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my chat with Dan from Slice Engineering. I hope you will take him up on his generous offer to get 10% off anything from Slice Engineering by using the promo code PODCAST. If you aren't already, it would be really cool if you wanted to subscribe to 3D Print Authority before you get on with the rest of your day. Until next time, happy printing.